everyone, and welcome back to the Treble Clef Project. Today I'm joined with another very talented special guest, and she's going to introduce herself and tell us about her involvement in the performing arts.
Hi, so my name is Daniela Rojas. I'm a current freshman or pre-freshman at Cornell University. I graduated from Dorothy Valley High School. And when it comes to performing arts, so I've been playing the cello since fourth grade. And I think so it's been 8 years now, about 8 years. Um, I kind of started like when everyone else started, just like wanting to be in the orchestra or band. And I was self-taught for several years. Then I begged my parents to give me a private teacher because I just like fell in love and I wanted to like grow because I felt like I was not being challenged enough. And then I've just been kind of playing ever since. Even now, if I go here, that's Patricia. That's my New York cello. Um, yeah, I play just because I like to play. And I think I've just been in orchestras all throughout high school. I was in the chamber orchestra at Dorothy Valley. And as of now, I'm preparing for my Cornell Orchestra's audition. Um, yeah, that's my performing arts bio, I guess.
Awesome. So, can you tell us a little bit about your experience being in orchestra at Doherty Valley?
Yeah, so at DV, I feel like other groups like band and choir low key get more hype, but it's okay because music is music. And I think like in the general orchestra, I was definitely not being challenged enough. Especially like cellists are usually subjected to the parts of music that are like playing the D string over and over again because we're like the bass line. But it kind of gets to a point where I'm like, okay, I want to play something actually that actually sounds like a piece. Um, so I think like I got into the chamber orchestra. I think the earliest you can get in is sophomore year and audition as a freshman, and that's what I did, and that worked out for me. I think for a while, I think I was at least one of the youngest people there that year, and I think it was definitely it was very fun, and I really loved it. But I think also I was kind of intimidated by like some people like there was some people who were like, oh, I'm going to my Juilliard edition or whatever, or other things that were kind of like, because you know how when it comes to like classical music or whatnot, the stereotype is like someone who's Asian playing like the violin or whatever. And I think I've gotten some comments where people are like, oh, I thought you were Asian because you play the cello. And I was like, not great, but I think like it just being like the one Latina in like an orchestra that's like, even Dorothy's mostly Asian, so that's a whole nother thing. But I think in a way, being in orchestra kind of taught me how to sort of just like it doesn't matter that I'm like that I don't come from a family that's like you must practice all this time or whatever. And I think I really learned the difference between people who play because they're being forced to versus people who play just because they want to. For me, my parents or my mom had to put limits on how much I practice for the sake of neighbors. And I think that says something compared to someone who's like, oh, they have to practice. So I think Dorothy, like, Dorothy, it's its own thing. And I'm very lucky to go there, very privileged. But at the same time, there is some like low key toxic competition. But I think being in orchestra really taught me how to like evolve into my musical self. And especially because for a while I struggled with performance anxiety, which is like a very fancy word for stage fright. Even though I'm not that kind of person, like I'm usually pretty outgoing. But for some reason, I think because I was so intimidated by people who were like, oh, it's just like a talent that you have or that you're gifted with. And for me, I was like, no, I had to work for this. And I think I felt so horrible at times where I would just play and I would like shake and I couldn't perform for people. So that's why I stopped auditioning for outside orchestras after this one really horrible director of a youth orchestra literally made me cry during an audition. Which I'm like, it's a youth orchestra that we don't even get paid to be in. Why you got to be so harsh? But that could be another rant about old white guys and classical music. We're not going to go there. Uh, but yeah, I learned a lot from it, and I would honestly not trade it for anything else because it helped make me. And sometimes, like, if I don't have my cello like with me, I like I don't feel like myself. Like I am the kid who like carries around my cello. That's because I have to like trust issues leaving it places. But like it literally feels like an extension of me. And also like it's not as heavy as it looks. Like the cello, it's a hollow instrument. Um, but I do have more muscle in this arm than the other arm because of the carrying. So that's a tangent, but I think that answers the question and more.
What do you enjoy most about playing the cello?
I think that's a good question. I think it's just because it's like it's so versatile, and it's also so it's unique, but in a way that's like you can make it what you want, because you can play like really really low kind of depressing songs, or you could go like you could kind of like try to mimic a violin, or you could literally, there's like the Bach prelude, the first suite, and that's like what people like. There's like it's called like the cello song, like unofficially, and as soon as people hear like the da 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 da, like they know what's coming. And I think it's just so cool. And I think for a while, like that was actually my solo piece that I played for my chamber orchestra audition. And it was like the best thing ever. And I think I just like the sound that the cello has, and also like the feeling of like, because I'm someone I've, how some people just like hugs and some people don't. I'm the kind of person that I generally, most of the time, I love hugs. And I feel like the cello is like kind of an instrument that I can hug. It's kind of funny, but I think sometimes it's just like just helps me feel it just helps me feel me. And it's just like I love the sound, I love the feeling, and like when you just like, because I can feel me in it. That's that doesn't sound great. I'm just trying to figure out how to, yeah, it's just the sound, the feel, and like I don't feel like I'm me without it.
And then on that same note, what is the most challenging part about playing the cello?
I think I think the challenging part about playing the cello is that like, I mean, it's not very portable. I mean, that's like a logistical challenge. Like even here, like I have a cello from my college, not my home cello, because it's kind of a risk flying with the cello. Um, I think something that's just like kind of hard is like kind of always being like the outlier, that big instrument just in the corner, like versus like a flute or violin, you could just like carry it around like and no one really notices. But in the, on the flip side of that, I feel like I get noticed in a way that's a little more like people just know me as like the cello girl, even if they don't want to talk to me. I just think like sometimes it's hard, like kind of going back to some things from Dorothy, like sometimes the competition. Um, I think other instruments like violin are a little more competitive though, because there's so many people who play it. I just think it depends where you're at, honestly, because you can make any instrument, anything, like you could make it whatever you want. Like you could make it a pop group, or you could make it like a baroque or classical or whatever. I just think it depends on the environment you're in, because like that impacts everything. And I think like there was some periods during orchestra. I think the couple times the orchestra wasn't great was when like we didn't really have like a teacher, and that was all in limbo. And when all that stuff was happening, it's like kind of like I think everyone kind of felt a little soulless when they played, because there was no one like telling us what to do, and people weren't as committed. So the environment is what impacts like everything and how you play. And I think that's why like what is challenging about the cello is the same thing that's challenging for every other instrument. It's just the environment that you're in, where you're at, and also your attitude.
What advice do you have for people who do have stage fright and performance anxiety?
I think trying to think about like what I would have told my younger self. I think like just I think one thing would be that like not everyone cares as much as you think they do, but I think it's easier to say that than to like fully believe that. And I think one thing to tell yourself is that like it's okay for it to feel this bad, and like it's not because there's something wrong with you. Like it's just because things aren't working out, and you just need to work on literally practice performing, And like, you could also like talk to like your doctor or whatever about anxiety stuff. That's a whole nother mental health tangent. I think the point is that, sometimes like I've had to make a decision, like, how seriously do I want to take this instrument? Like, do I want it to be like do I want to major in music, or do I want to keep it something that's truthfully enjoyable, but I still find ways to challenge myself? And I opted in for that one because I feel like I have a lot of other things that I'm more passionate about in terms of just like, my academics or career pursuit or whatever. Um, but like even during high school when I was so stressed, like my cello was kind of like my way to just express myself, even when I didn't have words to articulate how I felt. And I think just when it comes to coping with like stage fright and whatnot, you just have to remember like like for me, I had to recall like why do I even play? And the point of music is to like, make people happy because people like to hear music, etc. But at the end of the day, you are the person making that music. Like, you have to remember that it's okay to take a break from auditions and whatnot. And it's okay if you don't make the honor orchestra or whatever. Like that level of whatever does not determine your like talent or ability. And even then, like, yeah, sure, like there's Yo-Yo Ma, he's great, he's a prodigy, but literally most people don't come out of the womb with a cello, or any instrument. And I think that's something that I had to remind myself a lot. Even now, like I still struggle with it, but it's gotten a lot better just because I think overall, like I've figured out other aspects of my life and my mental health. But I think I've just sort of like realized that like if I screw up, it is what it is, and that literally everyone's human. And it's live music. Like you're gonna screw up, and you're not a CD player. You're not a robot. You're a human. So that's something that I've had to remind myself. So it took me years of practice to like truly get to a place where I could play for people. But yeah.
How has the pandemic affected your music experience and the way you play?
I think the pandemic is like, it's been, honestly, I think it helped in a way, because it's like I have more time to practice. I think, I mean, sometimes during senior year, it was like just some really bad time management stuff, and I didn't get as much time to practice as I wanted to. But that's because I was trying to like deal with school. But I honestly think the pandemic like kind of forced me to relook at my priorities. And like as my like private teacher would tell me, is like practice smarter, not harder. Because sometimes I would be like just playing like a little part from a passage over and over and over again. And she would be like, okay, well, why are you playing this over and over again? I'm like, because I keep screwing up. She's like, why don't we fix that little rhythm part and then you play the fixed version? Because otherwise you're just like, it's like the equivalent of just like walking into a wall over and over again. So I think the pandemic taught me how to like prioritize like what I practice, how I practice, and that literally I think kind of like the joy behind music and why people have music in their lives. Because pandemic happened and literally just like pandemic happened and people just found comfort in things that weren't like but they wouldn't before. And I just think the pandemic made me realize how important music is and how valuable it is, and that music, like especially classical music, deserves a lot more hype.
So how do you balance like um practicing music and also like schoolwork and then like your social life as well?
I think, see, like that's something that I'm still working on, and it's like it's hard, but I think sometimes I know some people have like private teachers that like get mad at them if they don't practice, or it's like, how dare you not practice? But I've noticed that for me, like sometimes I'll go to a lesson, I'll be like, I had a really rough week and I didn't have time to practice. And she'll be like, it's okay, let's work on like what you would have practiced, and let's set things like let's figure out what is best for you and how you could better spend your time. And I honestly feel like that's just kind of part of it, just figuring out how to spend your time wisely. And for me, I think the really important part was having the cello be something that I challenge myself in, but at the same time, it's something that relieves my stress. And it only causes, like, I try to keep the ratio of like how much it relieves to stress, like how much to how much it causes stress, like more relieving than actually causing stress. Because of so many other things like academics and all the stuff, like that often causes more stress than like relief. So I think the key thing is to find something that you like that helps you relieve stress. Even if you get stressed out about it, it helps, like, I guess, fix the other parts of your life. So I guess it just kind of falls in line with like my emotions and how I feel. And that's how I manage. And I know like that's not solid advice for time management, but sometimes you kind of have to look at like how you feel and how your mind is going to like gravitate towards a task or whatnot.
What is a memorable experience you've had playing the cello?
Oh boy, there's a lot. I'm trying to think of one. Uh, I think one of the ones that was like really cool was, this was in middle school. So like, I've like traveled to more places and stuff, but in the eighth grade, they like selected a certain amount of people from the orchestra and put it into like one more advanced orchestra. And we were playing like, we actually got to play the music from Les Miserables. And we got to actually tour a bunch of like elementary schools in San Ramon, and it was so awesome because like, yeah, the music was hard, but it was so cool because like it was so cool like to hear like the do you hear the people sing, just to hear all of that but like right in front of you. And for me to like because the cellos, like they had some like solo parts like as a section, and it just made me so happy. And then like going to like Quo Run, like where I went and noticed, I didn't realize how little the chairs are until going back as a high schooler, or no, as a middle schooler, because the chairs were like this tiny and I had to lower my end pin to like this because it was so little. But just to see like the little kids' faces and just to be like, oh, that's a cello or that's that, it's just made me so happy. And I think it was one of the like the purest experiences I've had. And it was like a moment that was like, this is why I play.
So, what is, I guess, like, how is playing the cello in college different than high school? Or like, what have you been experiencing right now?
I think right now, just because I'm here like over summer, I have noticed that like, because over summer, like they don't like all the groups and stuff and like clubs and whatnot, they're not really running. It's more of like preparation for the school year. So I don't really know how like the general music scene is, but I do know that like um I think it's kind of cool because you go there, and college it's pretty much you gotta just play. You just play for yourself. But the thing is, you have to play good enough to like get into an orchestra or whatnot. Because I had a friend who went with me when I picked up Patricia from New York, and he was like, "So I learned the violin a little bit. I could play Twinkle Twinkle, and I want to learn more." And the guy who was like the professor of cello at the Ivy Leagues or whatever, he was like, yeah, so you need to be at a collegiate level to like, he said it in a nice way, obviously. He's like, yeah, but there's some other places you could take lessons like in the community or whatever. But I think that's the biggest difference, is that in college you're just expected to play at a certain level, or at least like within the range, or able to be taught certain skills, versus I think within high school, or especially middle school and elementary school, like if you pick up a new instrument you're encouraged to, but in college you're just encouraged to further what you know. I think that's the biggest difference. Yeah.
Why do you think music is important and why should it be encouraged in youth?
Because I think like without music, like, I mean, because I mean, I listen to other stuff like podcasts and things like that, but even podcasts, they have like music that's like their transition music or like their intro music. Some it's like instrumental, and it's like, and music is kind of the backbone of every single like movie, TV show, whatever. Like if you don't think about it, like even like the film score or the ominous sounds you hear in the background of a horror movie, like that's a whole like orchestral section right there. And I think without music, like nothing would have color, but in like the auditory sense.
That's an interesting way to put it. I really like that. So, my last question for you is what advice do you have for people who want to get involved in music and playing an instrument?
I think like start as young as you can, but I also would say that it's never too late to learn an instrument. I would say like if you just started college and want to be in the college orchestra, maybe figure something out, because or it depends, or sometimes they have smaller like groups that you can join that are clubs and stuff that don't necessarily require that level of playing. But I would honestly say that there's no such thing as like having the talent to play an instrument or like the means or the wealth or whatever. It's all about how much you care and just how much you can put into it and how much you're willing to accept that like, you know, that you need to screw up several times in order to get like one perfect like measure or something. And I think people get this mixed up like a lot when it comes to anything that's creative, especially like music and writing. Like people think that like I get a lot of like, oh, you're such a gifted writer, gifted musician. And I'm like, I'm flattered. But then at the same time, it's like, I, like literally like years ago, you could look at an essay that I wrote and be like, this, you could tell this was a 12-year-old. Or, you could pull up one of my old orchestra or like one of my old recitals and be like, oh, she's so cute, but that was so out of tune. And that's just how it is. And everything that turns out really good, you're gonna suck at some point, and that's just how it is.
All right, well, that's all I had for today. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for the video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on Wednesday for another one. Bye, everyone.